A new survey just out reveals that a majority of Democrats want to abolish the Supreme Court. No, this is actually not a joke. I'm looking at a report by Miranda Devine in the New York Post that gives us the details. And not only do a majority of Democrats feel this way, but as we'll find out in a moment, a majority of young people, 19 to 39, also feel this way. Supreme Court is racist, sexist, and ought to be abolished. A poll done, by the way, by the Heartland Institute. And what do these people want to do with the court? No court? So we only have two branches of government, just in a legislature and executive? No. They actually want to have, quote, a new democratically elected court with justice chosen by the American people. Justice is chosen by the American people. So in other words, I mean, think about that. If the American people are choosing the justices, then we would, in a sense, have two legislatures. We have a democratically elected legislature, a democratically elected court, which serves as a kind of super legislature, and then we have an executive, also democratically elected. So it appears like the movement here is to what can be called pure democracy. Let's look at some of the details. 67% of Democrats think the court is fundamentally sexist. 56% believe it's fundamentally racist. And when you look at young people, you find similar percentages. A larger percentage thinks it's sexist, and then a narrow majority thinks it's racist. And then, interestingly, about half of Democrats, not quite a majority, but almost a majority, wouldn't mind if the United Nations has the power to overturn Supreme Court decisions that it thinks, meaning the United Nations thinks, violate human rights. Now, at some level, this is just preposterous. It's absurd. It shows kind of no understanding of our system of government, which is a constitutional democracy, which has a kind of not only separation of powers, but checks and balances. If you have a democratically elected Congress and a democratically elected court, where's the check and where's the balance? It would appear to be that you'd have the same kind of people serving in both institutions. You might say, well, the Supreme Court, you have to have law degrees and so on. Well, most people in Congress have law degrees. So you'd have the same community, if you will, of lawyers running both the Congress and the courts. In fact, it raises the question of why even have that duplication of effort? Why not just simply have one body doing both functions? Congress basically passes laws. Congress itself decides if the laws are constitutional. You don't need another body to referee the case. Because after all, even the Constitution doesn't stand in the way. The left is willing to use interpretive latitude to insert things in the Constitution that aren't there, take things out of the Constitution that are there. And so if you step back, you realize that about half the country, or close to it, doesn't really believe in our system of government. They don't believe in the idea of a constitutional democracy, the architecture that has, by and large, served the country pretty well, going all the way back now since the 1780s. The left sort of doesn't believe in it. And that, to me, suggests that we are in a deep crisis that goes beyond individual issues. It's true, some of this sentiment may be arising out of recent court decisions. I don't like the Roe v. Wade overturning, and so, do we really need a court? So it's a reaction to court decisions on gun rights, on religious freedom. But another way to look at it is that the left doesn't believe in those rights. They're not fans of religious freedom, at least in any meaningful interpretation of the term. They are not fans of the First Amendment. At least they're perfectly willing to have all kinds of censorship that is even prodded and engineered by the government working in tandem with private companies. They certainly don't want the Second Amendment. I think if you put the Second Amendment to a vote, you'd find that a fairly decisive majority of Democrats would vote to just take it out of the Constitution if they could, or render it, in a sense, a kind of a lame duck clause. And so the Constitution is being held up, in my opinion, and the court is being held up by and large by the other half of the country, which recognizes that majority rule nevertheless should not have the ability to trample on individual rights. In other words, there are individual rights that are sacrosanct. They are safe from the ambitions of the majority. That's the way our system is designed. The court is the active custodian of those rights. And if we don't have a Supreme Court, Debbie actually made this point on the podcast a day or two ago, we might as well say goodbye to those rights, because the court is their protector. If you don't have a court, those rights become immediately vulnerable to being overrun by a majority. Now let's remember, majority rule cuts both ways, because just as their majorities can trample on our rights, our majorities can trample on their rights. That's something that the left is not thinking about. Right now, they think they've got the majority on their side, but let's think about it. Their majority is fragile. It's a slim majority. It's probably slipping away as we speak. If we had an election right now, their majority would be gone. And so they need to remember that while they champion the tyranny of the majority, this also gives us an opportunity to tyrannize over them.